Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of Luke 8. So it is still Jen and I talking about the entire chapter of Luke 8. And now we're kind of merging into this area where we discuss the bleeding woman and Jairus's daughter. Well, Jairus, actually not necessarily his daughter. So join us as we kind of discuss, what does it mean? How did they come to him? What does that look like? Is that how we're required to come to him? And how did he respond to them in these ways? And then how does that play out in our real life? So join us as we have this conversation, and I'll see you guys in a minute. Hey, welcome to Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and this channel is here to kind of merge Bible living with Bible literacy. So we are going to be using the New Testament this year in order to understand what it's like to live as a follower of Christ. I have a link below in the description that I have a download that will bring you to a chronological Bible reading of the New Testament. So what I want you to do is read every day and join me and hopefully some friends as we talk about what it means to live as a kingdom builder. Let's get started.
What if what if my purpose is not to grow, but to help someone else grow?
Yeah. And I don't know. I still don't know where to put that because I hear what you're saying. One of the things that I noticed when I did, and just a selling of myself, Bible 365, I did last year. I did the Old Testament last year. So if you want to read through the entire Bible, I did the Old Testament last year. And one of the things that I noticed in the Old Testament was there was a very clear hierarchy, right? And so I'm still in the area. I don't know if Jesus demolished that or not. So in the Old Testament, there was the Levites, right? Well, if we go from the top, there were the sons of Aaron, who were essentially the bridge between the people and God, right? So there was a hierarchy. So they were at the top of the hierarchy. And this was before there were even kings. They were at the top of the hierarchy. Then there were the Levites, which was the entire tribe, that people group that lived and dwelled in and around the temple, right? And then there were the elders, which were like the top dogs in every tribe. So every tribe had like a handful of men. And I want to say it was 12 because we keep going back to that number. But there was, they had a handful of elders in the top of all those tribes. And the elders would meet with the Levites, or the elders would meet with the sons of Aaron, right? Like, so they were all like kind of getting together, and they would be the ones who made the decisions based on what God said. And then they would let it travel down to all the people, right? And so I tell you this because then there's all the people. And so like, what responsibilities do all the people have? They just kind of follow what everyone, right? Like what all these top people said, maybe in the hopes of becoming an elder one day. I don't necessarily know, but like their jobs were essentially just like, hey, they told me what to do and I need to follow what to do. So maybe that is still true now. Again, I don't necessarily know because a piece of me says Jesus says we're all priests now. So like maybe there isn't a hierarchy, but then I'm like, well, then what does that mean? Does that just look like what you said? Someone's up here holding someone and drawing them up, and then that person's drawing the next person up. But eventually they're all supposed to meet up at the top of the mountain, right? Like, so I don't know. I don't have an answer for you, obviously, but like thinking of that, like, do you think you're supposed to be stuck in the middle? Right? Like, is that your eventual goal, or is your goal to be up at the top of the mountain?
Well, I think it depends on each individual person. I personally would like to be at the top of the mountain, but I don't know what God's plans are for me. Right. Maybe God's plan is that I'm in the middle to help somebody climb off my back to get up to the mountain.
Oh, maybe. Right? I don't know. I'm definitely up in the air with that. I'm up in the air. I part of me thinks Jesus wants everyone to make it to the top of the mountain before we die. But
like I said, this is a different conversation.
Right. I don't know.
We could go way down a rabbit hole.
Right.
Because we got Judah or Judas, right?
Well, yes. So that's a whole, right. We didn't get there yet, but we will definitely get there.
So, spoiler.
Okay. So just kind of like, just to hit on these last little sections. So we go to so we see Jesus sort of doing all these little things. And in verse 22, he stills the water. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add, because he goes in, he falls asleep. And then obviously things come in. They were just going, it seems like they're just traveling to the other side of the water. So they go in the lake, and they're just traveling over to the other side of the lake. And so everything gets a little crazy. He winds up falling asleep, and then they wake him up. Is there anything that like stands out to you, that resonates with you, that you think is important think it says Peter. It just says, he says to them, where's your faith? They were fearful and amazed, saying to one another, who is this then that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him? So we can assume that Peter's on this boat. It doesn't actually call him out by name. This is not where Peter walks across or walks out on the water. This is a different one than that. This is where, like I said, he's kind of in there and the water gets a little bit crazy. And instead of them asking or saying, hey, Jesus, can you help us with this? And my mind just kind of went to that. They still didn't. So they were starting to understand who he was, but they still didn't get it. And this maybe is where, talking about that being in the middle of the road kind of thing, like this maybe is where some of us get stuck. Maybe that's like an idea of some of us get stuck. Like I get it. I see what you've done. I believe what you've done. I know you are who you say you are, but have I given you all the power that you actually have? Right? Like, do I let you come into my life and take away my fears? Do I trust you when you say, be honest about, I don't know, something that could possibly hurt you?
Right.
Do I fully believe that if I openly repent about this, that, that I won't be a pariah in this job or neighborhood or whatever, right? Like maybe it's those kinds of things. Like maybe this is a stuck in the middle kind of moment. Like I believe, but I'm still holding back a little. Like I still don't, because he asked, where's your faith?
Right.
And they were probably like, what do you mean, where's my faith? Like, what does that have to do with the fact that the ocean is churning up all over the place and you're sitting here sleeping? So, I want to have compassion for them, but in the same respect, kind of going like, what's he trying to say to them? Because these were people who followed him.
I think that at first I was like, oh, they're in the thorny soil, right? But no, they're more in the place where there's not enough water. And it's like
no moisture.
They have faith until something catastrophic happens.
Right.
And then they're like,
yeah,
I'm out. So,
the roots haven't dug in yet, right? The roots haven't.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's, again, like you said, these are followers and you think, okay, I'm going to follow, but it's like, well, maybe not. Right. I don't know. What happens if he doesn't calm the sea and we all drown?
Right. Right. We're all going to die. Right. This is a death moment, which is
right.
Interesting that he would still be asleep through that, but.
Right. And so they had enough faith to not panic and try to solve it themselves. They still went to him, but then they were still skeptical about, all right, is he really going to pull it off? Or are we all going to be fish food? Like,
right. Right. Like, yeah. They were definitely nervous. And I'm sure there's a time in my life, and I just can't think of anything offhand, but I'm sure there's a time in my life where I just didn't know if he could pull it off. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just didn't. And again, would I necessarily see that? Like being compassionate to them, they probably don't even realize that they're not subjecting themselves to him in this power. They might not, again, they're probably not aware. And this is why I'm so psychotic about reading your scripture and knowing, because when we do, like now, if I read this, then I'm aware, right? Okay. He has the power to stop the ocean. Well, it's not the ocean. It was the lake, but it was huge. It was like,
right.
I'm thinking like Lake Erie, like if we go really big, it was a really big lake and they couldn't see the shore. So they were out in the middle of it. And he just by voice alone, he has the power to stop the water from doing what he's doing. Do I believe that he has that kind of power? And if he has that kind of power to do that, what kind of power does he have in my life? Like, can I fully recognize his power and then recognize that it's to the smallest of the minutia? He was on this boat with just a small amount of people, and he was just like, stop, everybody's safe. Can I recognize that he can do that for me also with the great power that he is? And I know I'm talking a lot, but I also think like that brings the idea of how good God is, that God sent him in human form so we would know that he loved us enough to worry about the minutia.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like God sometimes seems so far away that maybe we forget, but Jesus is that human line, right? That's like in front of us and that's saying like, I'm here specifically for you. Right. Like, Jen, you're worried about the troubles, but like, I can conquer thorns.
Right.
I mean, right? Like if you, I have thorny soil and he's like, you think I can't destroy a thorn when I can stop water?
Right. Right.
You know?
And it's like what we were discussing earlier. It's like, you can give people examples and have them read and research and learn about how to ride a bike, but until you're actually physically on the bike, you're not going to know what it's like. Right. And so that was the point of Jesus coming down and saying, okay, I'm with you. I am doing the same things that you guys are doing. I'm in the thick of it.
Yep.
And I need you to trust me. And
I'm in the water too. I'm in the boat. Like the boat's shaking. I'm in the boat.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, part of the sin or part of the unfortunate circumstance is that you see with the disciples or even, any of the people who are following Jesus that I also recognize in my own life. I've seen the miracles. Mm-hmm. I've witnessed the good that has come from believing in God.
Yeah.
But every time a new instance comes up, I have instant amnesia. It's like, I forget.
It's like having a baby.
Exactly.
You're like, yeah, I'll do it again. You're like, why? Why would you do that again?
Exactly. It's like, oh yeah. I forgot about all those other times that he helped out. This one, nope, he's not going to help me on
this one's too big.
This is the one that's going to break it. No.
Yeah. Like even thinking about your work, I know, even thinking about your work, like, no. What? I can't show you how to use these things. Like I can't help you. Of course I can help you do those things. Like that's minor. And I can show you if you listen to me and follow me. And, it's in sometimes in our lives, like, and I appreciate this, like even this talk about like compassion and loving on others, right? And like doing those things. Sometimes in our lives, it's important for people to say, even the way we behave, right? Like knowing that he can help us with all those things that maybe people don't necessarily say. And I don't know, like trying to think of something like, am I willing to let Jesus help me in my work, right? Or do I own it all? I'm a fitness instructor. I take great pride in a lot of the work that I do. Do I do it myself or do I let Jesus guide me in it? Do I let him, guide, obviously my own brain finds my own things to do, but do I let him guide me in the way in which I do it? Like, oh, I'm going to do this because of my love for somebody else. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if I'm explaining it well, but sometimes we are focused on outwardly what we look like to somebody else. Mm-hmm. But like we have all this inner turmoil and stuff, like the way that I parent, the way that I work, the way that I treat my coworkers, the way that I treat my parents, there are so many other things that don't necessarily have that outward thing, but have a lot of stuff that's going on inside of us that I think he's telling us he can work on too. Right? Like going back to the thorn, I can kill that thorn.
Right. Right.
I can kill that thorn, but you have to let me kill the thorn.
Right.
You can't prevent me, right? Yeah. Like in a lot of ways, like, right. Like you're putting up a barrier and you're like, don't touch the thorn. And he's like, I thought you wanted me to kill the thorn.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't want this thorn.
Right. Do you want me to?
Thorn.
Right. Do you want me to or don't you to? And truthfully, like to bring us to and kind of passing the demon story, which I think we've done a bunch of times, but to go to the bleeding woman and Jairus, like the way that they asked him for help. And I don't know if you notice it, but like the first thing that they do, both of them, well, she goes and touches his cloak, but when they're confronted with him, they fall down and they're like humble and submitting themselves to him. Mm-hmm. And it's because they know they're desperate.
Right.
So I don't know, just a way to look at how desperate are you?
Right. Which is a scary thing because for some people, maybe myself included, you think to yourself, how much do I have to suffer before I get it?
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like,
how much am I willing to take? Yeah.
Right. And it's like, you can look back and the suffering is not incomparable. In contrast, it's not as bad as you think that it is, 2020 hindsight. But then you think to yourself, okay, well, I thought that those things were pretty bad. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't rock bottom.
Right.
So how much more do I need to go through?
Yes.
And that's the, and again, totally a different tangent, but if you're trying to help, you're trying to help yourself. You're trying to connect yourself with God if you want to be a believer and you want to grow your faith. And also through that, the best way to learn something is to teach, because then you get to learn it twice, right? So that's a Jim quick reference.
That's funny. I never heard that expression. I've heard the one where it's like, if you teach, you learn 90%. If you read it, you learn 50%. I don't know if you ever heard that expression. And then I actually heard that was totally made up. But I'm like, but when people do teach, they actually do learn more. So I think there's truth to it.
Yeah. But I think that, it's like you keep wanting to like help yourself and help others, but you want to help others, and you think that if you the better that you make yourself, again, like going back to that previous conversation, right? You're not going to attract people by being like, you need to read the Bible,
right?
Like when you go to
that's what I do,
Miami, and you're like, on the beach, and you got the people with the megaphone being like, Jesus is coming, be ready, like, people are not attracted to that. You have to do it in small, subtle ways, so that, again, you need to build those relationships. Yeah. You got to create that bridge so people want to come over to your side. That's the danger for me is, you want to make it attractive, but the prosperity gospels are not great, because it makes you think that everything is going to be okay. Right. And then when things start to hit,
then where are you left?
Then you're like, but things are supposed to be good. And then, you get through it, and then you're like, okay, but it's like, but you're still not there.
Right.
So how much further am I sliding down that mountain? How many other hands am I going to have to? And that's where it just makes you wonder, okay, am I meant to come up the mountain, or am I just a vehicle for someone else?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just think that all of our walks are so different. And some people, like, I'm trying to explain this because I have a visual of what I mean. Because I understand what you're saying. That doesn't necessarily mean
the whiteboard so you can draw it out.
Because it doesn't necessarily mean, so like, if you're stuck in a place where there's a lot of suffering in your life, and I have a really good friend who has gone through more suffering than I want to say she deserves. I hate using that expression, but I feel like she's gone through more suffering. It's a co-friend we know. Yeah. More suffering than she deserves. And she is one of the most merciful, gentle, kind, amazing, loving people that you will ever meet. And I think, how can that be fair that she is this loving, kind, and gentle, and she has to go through this amount of suffering in her life?
Right.
Whether it be sick kids or a bad husband or like whatever it might be. Right. And in some ways, I wonder, without sounding callous, because I don't want to sound callous, I wonder if a certain amount of suffering isn't our lot in life. And I don't know whether it be, I don't know. I don't know why it would be that way, right? Like, okay, I love the Lord. I love the Lord. I follow the Lord. I do this Bible study. I do this podcast. Like, I'm doing what I believe the Spirit has asked me to do. Okay, where's my win? Like, right? Like, where's my win? Like, I have done this. Why aren't I? And it's a small piece in my head, because the other piece mostly says that's not on my plate. Right. And so, and going back to your suffering or your anxieties or your thoughts, like, maybe where you are in the mountain or your amount of suffering doesn't have to do with anything other than this is the hand we've been given. And will you love the Lord? If we go back to Job, right? Like, right. Job was a good guy. Like, he was doing the right things. He was honoring the Lord in a town, by the way, that they didn't honor the Lord. So this wasn't like an overtly it was long before the Jewish community existed, but it wasn't like a town that necessarily followed the Lord. And he was doing the right thing, and he just got hit with all of those things. I'm sure if you, the story of Job, his children died, his all his cows were taken and were killed, and right, his businesses were gone. All of these awful things happened. We see him get restored in the end, but there was something to be said about his lot in life. God just used him for that reason. And we can't say he did anything wrong. We can't necessarily say like he was even the most amazing person in the world, but it does say that he followed the Lord. So I don't know if that means you should be stuck in that area as much as it's just like, all right, I got another thing. Now, how do I depend on the Lord in this one? Right. Now, how do I depend on the Lord in this one? Because the idea, I think, is that Jesus wants us content in all walks of life, right? Like he says, Kathy, you will never be a millionaire. Sorry. It's not in the cards. You're not all that smart. You're never going to be, I mean, whatever it might be. Like, you're not all that great with money, whatever the whatever it is. You're not going to be a millionaire, but will you be content if this happens? Will you be content if this happens? Will you be content if your house isn't the biggest one on the block? Will you be content if your job isn't the most extraordinary job? Like, when I go in school, and I don't know if I ever told you this, so I work with emotional support kids. I know that, but they constantly make fun of me for my job. Like, why don't you get a better job? Like, oh, I don't ever want to grow up and have your job. It's not the most glamorous and glorious of jobs. It's really not. But I'm content in it because I definitely feel like that's where the Lord wants me to be.
Right.
So can you find peace and contentment and completely lean on the Lord no matter what's thrown at you?
Right.
Right. And I don't think his goal is to keep you in the middle. I think his goal is to use those things to allow you to get to the top in relationship with him, not necessarily in the top in life.
Yeah.
Right. Which might look different, right? Like you might not get to the top in life because it's like, well, I'm not going to Hawaii every year, which is kind of like, even though we don't believe in the prosperity gospel, we sort of all believe in the prosperity gospel.
We're all hoping.
Right. Like we're all right. We're all hoping. Like, why did this bad thing happen to me? I did really good things. And so, but we don't necessarily see that happens. And again, going to both of these stories, one of these guys was the top echelon, right? His daughter was dying. The other one was a pariah. She was like, she was less than, I don't want to say she was less than nobody, but she was unclean. So no one would have wanted to be near her. She should not have been out doing what she was doing. So not only was she unclean, but she was breaking the law, like the law according to the Israelites, right? Like she was breaking the law. She shouldn't have been where she was. She was amongst a whole bunch of other people and she should have been like unclean, much like the lepers did. But she wasn't doing that. And so they were both in different walks in life, and he healed both of them in different ways, right? He made them whole, I guess, so to speak, in different ways for them to be content in what they had. So while the bleeding woman, I don't know, they may have, we don't even know what happened to her afterwards. They may have still been like, we don't believe you. So I don't know. Again, I don't know what you think about that. That's kind of coming to the end of our chapter 8, which is a good place for us to be. But I don't know if there's anything else you want to hit before we say goodbye to chapter 8.
I would just say, if you're looking for the win is to be with him in heaven, right?
Yep.
So,
and after heaven,
right?
New heaven, new earth. But yeah,
right.
All those places. I have all kinds of ideas on heaven too, but that's a whole different recording. We're not that far yet. So, okay. On that note, if you stayed, this is definitely, it's an hour and 15 minutes. So we're definitely breaking this up into a couple of different videos. So, but if you enjoy this, if you found this to be a blessing, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I will get her back. I'm hoping we will do this again. Probably not every chapter, but we're definitely going to do it again. So we will see you next time. In the meantime, keep reading, and we'll see you guys next time.
God bless.